All
Good
right. Good morning.
afternoon. Good afternoon. Happy Monday. If you're tuning into this, it is Todd Caputo and Frank Knox coming at you from the buy side. And today we thought we would dive in and really talk about the market, talk about where things are headed for this tax season. And I want to take some time to dive in and talk to Todd about his background and about his history, rich history in the car business. But before we jump in,
And a
Todd,
little
man,
NADA too, Frank. We got to talk
yeah,
about NADA. It's coming up,
you're
buddy.
absolutely, buddy. We'll dive in and talk about some NADA and what you're looking forward to, what I'm looking forward to, and some boots that maybe people really need to check out that are maybe some hidden gems. But first and foremost, man, how you doing? How was your week?
My week was very busy. I've got some clients that they're very concerned about their used car business. They didn't have the best Decembers, and they're trying to kind of steer the ship a different direction a little bit for first quarter this year. So I spent a lot of time really talking to a lot of different people. Um, you know, I I've got a couple groups I'm working with now, and one is a six-store group, and another one is actually a seven-store group. And I spent time this week literally on Zoom calls with used car managers, general managers, and sales managers with about 14 dealerships. So I asked a lot of questions. It was pretty intense. It was a long week, but I learned a lot about what's going on, and you know, it's business isn't bad, but it's tough out there, and it's going to be a challenging year. So I'm optimistic about this year for sure, Frank. But I think that being disciplined is going to be extremely, extremely important, like it always is. And another thing I learned too this week, right? You know, as a quote unquote consultant, which I call myself a consultant, but I'm still at a dealer at heart. Um, and when I talk to managers and I look at things like look to book, for example, right? Like you can't just look to book as a number and just say, well, geez, it's just because you're not putting enough money in trades, right? And a lot of people just assume that that's what it means. You didn't put enough money in the trade, you didn't get it, and then you look at the missed trade report again. If you're using Viauto or any other kind of software, they bought the car somewhere else because you didn't put enough money in the trade. That's not always it. So, like,
Yeah.
those are the kind of conversations that we had. We talked about pricing this week. We talked about merchandising, reconditioning. How long it takes to get to the front line. Things like that. So that was a long answer to your question, but I was on a lot of Zoom calls this week.
Yeah, yeah. I'm with you, man. I'm talking to a lot of dealers. I was talking to a dealer group this week about going in and helping them with some things as well, much like you. And one of the things we talked about was that very topic. We talked about look to book and what that number means, and how do we look at that number differently as we move into what Look, I'm like you. It's going to be a very good year for the dealers that have the inventory. I think consumer sentiment is going to improve. I think tax refunds are going to be strong, but you have to have the inventory. And there's some dealers that, and we'll dive into this a little bit, but there's some dealers that are still sitting on the sideline waiting. And as my good friend David Spisak, I heard him say once, and I took that because it makes a lot of sense. Let's not be surprised by what's 100% predictable, right? If you look back at the MMR charts, and not that MMR is the end all be all, but every year we're faced with the same sort of thing. And that is the market starts to appreciate this time every year. And every year I feel like I'm having conversations with dealers where they're waiting, they're on the sidelines hoping that things maybe get a little bit cheaper, or they're waiting to get that inventory until they start seeing sales improve. And the reality is it puts them in a world where they're buying cars sometimes at the peak of the market. And right now, I don't know what you're seeing, Todd. I'd love to hear, but I'm in the auction spaces, you're in the auction spaces, and we're living in those lanes daily. I'm talking to my partner on the wholesale side. He's seeing things start to lift on the wholesale side, obviously, in his lane, but dealers are still on the sidelines. And companies like CarMax and Carvana and Echo Park and some of the other bigger players out there, they're not waiting around to buy, are they?
Now they're buying cars, right? Part of the issue, and I can understand it because, I was a dealer for a long time. I did it with my own money. Um, when it's slow and it's cold, like it's been this week, and we got a nice storm, and business maybe was a little bit off the last month or two. You got a floor plan bill, inventory sitting, your showrooms aren't quite as busy as they normally would be, and you've got some cars that are aging up. You're not necessarily in the mood to buy cars for whatever reason. If you're if you're on a strict, I stock X amount of cars. I'm on a 45-day turn, a 60-day turn, a 90-day turn, whatever my turn is, and you already have enough cars, you're not buying them. But well, I don't agree with that, right? Um, I didn't run my businesses that way, but I will tell you that a lot of dealers do. But I can understand why. Um, no one likes curtailments when those curtailment payments are due at the end of the month for a floor plan. No one, as a dealer who has their cash just sitting in cars, if they own them and they're not floored, likes their money sitting and earning nothing. But I will tell you that, especially in the used car business, a lot of it goes back to just the fundamentals of the business, right? And not being reactionary, which unfortunately a lot of people are in the car business and with other things too, and sometimes their personal life and their physical, your physical health or whatever, your spiritual health. But I would tell you, you need to be more proactive and not reactive. And
Yeah.
you know, it's good and bad, right? So for dealers that are proactive, you can take advantage of the dealers that are reactive, and that's what I try to do and teach my people to do when I had stores, and when I do consulting now for dealers, I tell them the same thing. But saying it is one thing, I think, and doing it is another. But these large publicly held companies like your Carvanas and your CarMaxes and your Echo Parks, they look at a lot of data, and the data shows them that. And we all know this in the car business. Look at cars go up in the spring. I mean, that's just the way that it goes. They drop in the fall, they go up in the spring, and that's the way it is. And then everybody needs and wants cars. And it's a very cyclical business, and it kind of does the same thing over and over again. History just repeats itself.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're 100% right. And I want to dive in because the last couple of weeks we've had two powerhouse guests on, and next week we'll have David Long on to talk about private party acquisition and buy centers and his journey. But we had the week one we had Brian Kramer on, and Brian Kramer talked a lot about the best end user and really diving in and talking about how to go out and really market your cars so that your cars are being picked up by all AI channels, right? So we talked about that, which was super interesting stuff. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that episode, go back and listen to that episode. Episode 2, we
Yeah.
talked about talked to Glenn Lundy, spent a lot of time talking about the culture of the dealership and how to improve that culture and really some best practices around that. Another great episode. Uh, but I want to dive in today and really, chop it up with you, Todd, and just find out you have a rich history in the automotive business. You're a strategic advisor for a number of companies, including Auto Acquire. You run
Yep.
your own consulting company. But before that, last week on the episode, you talked about owning dealerships and what that felt like, and I thought it'd be great for the group, for the audience to hear from you and just understand that you've been down this path, you've endured this journey and built a very successful business that ended up being bought by a major company out there as well. So I want to dive in and just talk to you about your journey. Like how did you get into the automotive business?
The birth canal, right? The birth canal. I'm second generation. My dad was my dad is a dealer, and I my dad had a used car lot on Erie Boulevard in Syracuse, and he had an old Airstream trailer that was very, very, like, basically the size of a bedroom with a desk in it, and about 10 used cars and a string of lights on literally a dirt lot. And I have memories of being on that lot with my dad as a kid, just cleaning cars, right? Like I was 5 years old, I
Yeah.
was cleaning cars. And my dad and mom too, like my dad collects, my dad's 84 years old, he's still living, thank God. And old cars are his passion, antique cars. So my life really revolved around cars from a very young age. It was antique car shows on the weekends, not really athletic events or sports or anything like that. As a kid, no, we weren't like going on trips hiking or hunting or fishing or whatever. Like my dad's world, literally to this day, is cars, and that's kind of the world that I was raised in. So that's how I got into the business initially. Was I was born into it. I when I was a kid in high school, I worked at the dealership doing all kinds of jobs in high school, and I worked some other jobs too, like McDonald's and Wegmans and other places and video stores because I wanted to work outside the car business, but I always worked at the store and always hung around the store. And when the time came that I graduated high school, I share people with a story. I share the story all the time with people. I didn't want to go to college, Frank. I didn't think I needed to go. I had been selling cars over the summer, making commissions, making money at, 17, 18 years old. And the money was like, I'm like, Dad, I just want to sell cars and make money. And I'll be a car dealer. I always know I want to be a car dealer. And he said, well, you can't work for me. And I said, well, what do you mean? I can't work for you. Why? And he goes, well, what if there's no cars someday? And I'll never, ever forget this, right? What if there is no cars someday? He goes, you have to have an education. So if you want to work for me, you got to go to college. So I ended up going to college and I got a 4-year degree in HR, human resource management, which my father recommended to me as well. And it was one of the best pieces of advice I ever got because, as you know, especially we talked about last week with Mr. Lundy, right? It's a people business, as we all know, and
Yeah.
being able to manage people. Um, all sorts of ways, but especially when it comes in terms of, let's use the word HR, has been really invaluable to me. It was invaluable to me as a dealer, and it was invaluable. It's still invaluable today as a consultant. I can tell you that for sure. So it was great advice. So I went to college locally in Syracuse. So I went to Lemoyne College, which is right near the dealership, the Chevy store, and I went to the class and I went to the dealership and I sold cars on Saturdays. I started going to auctions probably when I was 16, 17 years old. When I didn't have class, I was going to the auction.
Yeah.
And I was buying cars and going to GM factory auctions because my dad was a Chevy dealer, became a Chevy dealer. I forgot
Okay.
to mention that, right? My dad became a Chevy dealer in 1979, which is a whole other story. We won't bore everybody with that, but it was a rough time for him at the beginning, and the Lord saved him, right? Because he almost went broke. But you know, we had the Chevy store, and I was going to auctions and buying cars and getting involved in wholesale and standing on the block while I was in school. Um, so that's the beginning of my journey. Anyways, there's more, but that's my
Yeah.
roots. You want to know my roots? That's it. I swept floors. I worked as a service advisor. I scooped out the goop inside the inside the traps in the service department. You all know what I'm talking about there. I delivered parts. I broomed cars. I did it all, and a lot of that stuff, honestly, I did until I literally sold my stores to Sonic. So when I talk to people, I can relate because I've done it all. Other than turning a wrench, which I'm not mechanically inclined, I've pretty much done it all.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's an amazing story. And it mirrors a story similar. It mirrors a story that from a young lady that I know who's a successful Ford dealer, and her dad took that same approach and said, "Look, you know what? You're not going to work for me initially. You're going to go and learn this business on your own." I remember her working for me at CarMax and really learning the auctions and learning what to do at the auctions and learning really again the buy side of things. And I remember her giving me her notice and saying, "I'm going to go work in the family business." I had no idea that her dad owned 4 dealerships, and that's what she was going to do. But still in business, still ultra successful. And I think there are a lot. And I tell that story because I think there's a lot of lessons in that, going in and starting at the very, at the very bottom, really sweeping floors and crawling in and out of cars. And, look, I know what, the weather must have been like in Syracuse because living in Chicago and living in Chicago and going to Milwaukee Auto Auction and Detroit and Minnesota Auto Auction, all those years, and great in the summertime, but in the wintertime, man, when that weather hits, you're still out there in the lanes, crawling in and out of cars. You're in the snowsuit, and I think that's an invaluable lesson for people to have to go through to really learn, what that auction environment is like. I think all too often, like we turn the checkbook over and park people in front of a computer and have them buy cars. And, there really isn't a thorough understanding yet of what those CRs are like and how they're written and what to look for that, maybe the CR called out that was a little too harsh, that you may be able to buy that car still and get a discount because the CR is run down. There's so many things that are, in that, in those lessons that make you successful. But what I want to dive into, Todd, is everyone talks about buying cars the right way and buying cars right now. When you're in stores, just like I'm in stores, we still see that there's a lack of execution, that the execution is inconsistent. I'm curious, what do you think about that? Do you think that's accurate? One, and why do you think that is?
I would, Frank, if you own a dealership or multiple stores, buying cars has got to be as much of your DNA as it is selling cars, right? It's got to be literally built into the DNA of your dealership or dealerships. It's just got to be. If you're tracking how many cars you sell every day, like we all do on that wall in the sales office, right? We should be doing the exact same thing with how many cars we buy, right? And everybody in the dealership should get paid for a vehicle acquisition, period, right? Um, and I'm not knocking the auction space because it's truly a part of the business that I still love to this day. I love the auctions. I love, yeah, I love them in the lanes. I love it online, but it's really hard and it's extremely competitive. And you got to be able to buy cars in other places like your service drive, and you got to be able to buy cars off the street from consumers, and you got to be able to mine your database. And if you have people that work in your dealership and they all live somewhere, and I'll guarantee you when they drive home from work, they're going to drive past a car that's for sale on the side of the road. And if they're not incentivized to stop and take a look at that car, maybe leave their business card with a QR code on the back, or take a picture of the car, and take a picture of the for sale sign in the windshield with the name and a phone number, how much they're asking, it's not going to happen. It's got to be a part of the DNA. You always have to be buying, and really from any source you possibly can. It's super, super important that you do that. I just don't think that every dealer totally understands that. Um, you know, they just they don't get it. I mean, there's no other way to put it than that. A lot of them do, but some of them don't, or they think it's just, well, this is going to pass, right? It's just because of COVID and whatever. Like I always ran my business that way, but Carvana, CarMax, they're always buying cars, right? It
Yeah,
doesn't matter. They're going to
yeah,
make somebody an offer on every single car and put a number on every single car every time. You have to be able to do the exact same thing with precision, discipline. And then if you're going to make an offer on a car and you're going to buy a car from somebody, you have to have a process in the store where the customer's not waiting around. If they've got, you have to have good software, right, to give them a good number, and then you have to be able to collect data with that software ahead of time. So when they show up, you got to check and it's going to be pretty much close to ready or a draft, right?
yeah, for sure.
And unfortunately, that doesn't happen with a lot of new car stores. It does with some, but not others. But the last thing a customer wants to do is hang around a car dealership. This is one of those things I've always said. My father taught me this. He's like, going to a car dealership is like going to the dentist. Nobody wants to go, right? They really don't. And that makes sense to me. I like going to car dealerships because I'm a car dealer. I love being in a
You're
store.
right,
But you and
right.
I are
You're
weird, right?
right.
We're not normal people. Normal people, well, they want to get in, they want to get out. They absolutely hate it. So if you're going to give them buy the car from them, they don't need to be hanging around for an hour, 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Well, my boss is at lunch and he's got to sign the check, or so and so's got to look at your card. He ran down the street to Dunkin' Donuts and he'll be back in a little bit. Like, no,
Yeah,
like process a check, not literally on the spot, right? Have have a process to reappraise the car, or appraise it again properly, but give people a check quickly. Don't make them hang around.
yeah, yeah. You said something there that resonates. Like I love going into a dealership to take my car for service, and I take my laptop with me. I set up in the waiting area, And I just kind of walk around the dealership because I want to see dealerships from the inside out, right? What are the customers seeing when they come in? And I do this, and my wife never gets it, right? Like, why do you want to wait there? Like, because for me, I do get joy in being in dealerships. I do get joy in watching and talking to dealers because dealers are some of the greatest people on earth. And I've had the pleasure of meeting so many great people in this business that I enjoy going there. But one thing you said, if I could go back a little bit, is that some dealers don't take that buying seriously, right? Like it's secondary to them. And you're right when you say CarMax, Carvana. I don't like bringing up the big two all the time, but it's the one thing that we have to acknowledge as an industry is that these two organizations, they have that mentality. Like some organizations have the mentality of always be closing. They have the mentality of always be buying, right? Like it's just a very different philosophy when you enter the stores or enter those locations or enter their websites. Like it's plastered that they just want to buy your car. And if they buy all the inventory that's right for them, the sales at some point will happen. Todd, what do you say to organizations that say, look, I don't have the resources to go and have a full blown buying team like a CarMax, and I'm not quite sure how I can compete if I don't have I don't have the finances to employ a full blown buying team like a CarMax or Carvana.
Um, then if you're a new car dealer, you got to try to own every trade you possibly can. I mean, and be able to recondition and retail every single trade, right? If you're not going to play in that space or you don't want to make the commitment to it, you got to get cars somehow, right? And I'm not saying buy bad business and bury yourself in trades. It's not what I'm saying, right? But you got to really look closely at your sales process, your appraisal process, your follow up, your website, how you handle leads. Like you got to be able to make every single deal. And if you're going to, and there's some dealers that just live off trades and make money, right? I mean, there just are. They're not really buying cars at the auction or buying cars off the street. They don't do that. They don't have to. There might be,
Right.
smaller stores, the overhead's low. They can live, sell 40, 50 new cars a month and sell, 20, 25, 30 used cars a month. And they got 100% absorption and they can make money and they're good. And dealer's happy, he's getting his rent. And that's good for them, right? But if you want to compete with the big boys, right? And again, what's good for some is not good for others, I guess is my point, right? But if you're either got to go all in or don't, right? And then if you're not going to, then don't make excuses and don't try to be something that you're not. Like you have to commit 100%. Whether you talk to somebody like you that does this for a living, or David Long, or me, or Spizak, or the countless other, really wise people in this business that provide consulting services, you know, be ready to commit, right? And be ready to hold people accountable, and be ready to write checks, right? And be ready to make it a part of the DNA of your business. Be ready to make an offer on every single car that goes to the service drive, every one of them, right? And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if they bought the car a month ago, you're making them an offer. You make them
Yeah.
an offer on every single car, every single time, right? Mining your database. Like it's either do it or don't. I mean, that's the simplest way for me to put it, right? If you only go in halfway, you're going to lose. Like you're going to end up losing money and you're not going to be successful.
So you said something there that's a little bit controversial. Even if they bought the car a month ago, put an offer on that vehicle. And I
Yeah.
know that the big players, they're doing exactly that, right? Like, I don't care if you bought the car yesterday, right? Or, well, CarMax, you have a return policy. So let's call it 14 days. If you bought that car
Yeah.
14 days ago, CarMax is still going to appraise that car and give you a value. And they're unapologetic about what they sold the car for and what the car is worth. The two are two very different things, right? All too often I talk to dealers and even some of the logic in auto acquire, like we look at cars and we'll say, look, we probably don't want to put a value on that car until that customer's owned that car for 12 months. I was talking to a wholesaler about this, and he has a dealership as well, and he even said the same thing, like, hey, look, I don't know that I want to go out and appraise a customer's car that they, just bought a month ago, or that they've put less than 1,000 miles on that car. And to that, you would say, hey, look, you still want to put a value on that car, huh?
I agree. I think you should. Again, is it controversial? Yes. Do you need to have some word tracks around why you're doing it, especially if they're in a position where they're going to be in negative equity, which a lot of people are? Sure, but I can tell you what, they might have changed jobs in the last 2 or 3 weeks. All of a sudden, they might have found out that their wife or their significant other is going to have a baby. Um, Maybe they lost their job, right? And they need to cash their car. Like you don't know what's going on with somebody. And then if you use an auto acquire, you're also going to be looking at the other cars that they own in their garage, right? So
Yeah,
and
yeah,
making offers on those cars too, and at least having a conversation. Um, like that's why, and if you don't make it a habit, it won't happen. And I think that's another thing too. Like it's got to be done every single time and every single car in order to make it a process and a habit in your store. So you got to be smart about it, don't get me wrong, right? And and I'm not saying if they bought a used car from you 3 days ago and they're coming back for policy work, okay, because something's not right with the car, you're probably not going to be making them an offer. You better be looking at the record and making sure. But
right,
you might
right.
want to make, if you're using auto acquire, well, okay, then I'm going to make them an offer on the other three cars that they own because I know I have that data, right? So it has to be just, again, part of the DNA. It's what we do every day. We have somebody in the service drive or multiple people. We use this piece of software. We use um, these marketing pieces, whether it's whether you introduce them with a Carfax or you give them a hang tag in the window if they're not there, or you attach something to the repair order, or you're printing an offer out of Viato, or however you're doing it. It's got to be done every single time, over and over and over and over again by every single person every time, so you're successful. Because if you don't, all of a sudden, oh, you know what, the service drive just doesn't work. We tried it. How often do you hear that? We tried the service drive.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
tried. We didn't
Awesome.
really get any cars out of there, so we stopped doing it. Well, okay. Well, how, what was your pay plan? What was your process? Was it done every single time? Like those are the questions that I always ask.
Yeah, it's kind of like going to the gym, right? Like I got my sweatshirt on. I'm going to go work out here later, but that first time you go to the gym, like you're not getting results on day 1.
It hurts.
You're not getting results on day 10, right? That are visible, but you're building something. And that's what service drive acquisitions are really about, is that you start to build something over time. You start to build this repetitive behavior in your team, and as you build that up over time, what starts to happen is that car that maybe you appraised on day 1 when you launched your service drive acquisition program, maybe on day 45, that car is now being transacted, right? Maybe it's day 60 or day 90 that you continue to follow up on these service drive customers that are in your database. It's not going to happen in the first 30 days that you're all of a sudden flip a switch and you're just buying cars. You're talking about some of these most successful organizations out there. I think of, Patrick Abad and Beaver Toyota. They it took years for them to build their buy center out. It took years for Rob Dell, who will be on the show in a couple of weeks. It took years for him to build his buy center out at Bob Ruth Ford. People who enter this space and think that that's going to happen overnight, end up being in for a rude awakening. And I think that's why we see the fall off, that, hey, it's just too hard. I don't have the ability to do it. I don't have the bandwidth to do it, because they haven't really invested in it and said, I'm all in and we're going to do this. And regardless of what the market is today, we're going to sustain this program for the life of my organization, right?
Well, yeah, not just that, Frank, and I agree with everything you said, but I'll tell you another thing too. It's no different than going to the auction and buying cars, right? You make a bid list of, you put together a bid list at an auction, say 100 cars, 150 cars. How many cars are you going home with, right? Whether you're buying them online or you're buying them at a physical auction. How many cars are you going home with if you put 150 cars on the bid list? What do you want? 10?
Yeah, if I walk out of there with 10,
Yeah.
Todd, look, having worked for CarMax as long as I did, we would go to the auction and people thought we were nuts. We would go to the auction, we would get there the day before, we would walk every car on property, and then we would make sure we were back the next day at 6 a.m., 6:30 a.m. to make sure that anything that got checked in overnight, that we could walk all of those cars. And we would have a list of, call it 1,000, 1,500 sometimes biddable cars at the auction. And this is Metro Milwaukee, where it was a fairly big sale. On their Highline weeks, we'd have a list of 1,500 cars. You know how many we left with? 80,
Yeah.
90,
And there was a
right?
group of you, there was a group of you there, right? And each one of you had one or two lanes that you were assigned to, and it
That's
was
right.
disciplined and it was orderly, and you had a number that you put on the car, and you didn't deviate from that number.
That's right.
Like that was it, right? And again, I saw the CarMax buyers for years at the auction. When I go to the auction now, which I still do occasionally, they're still there and they follow the exact same discipline. It's no
That's right.
different. The
That's right.
discipline, the discipline is the key to the used car business. Period. You've got to be
Yeah.
extremely, extremely disciplined when it, especially when it comes to acquisition. Like you just have to be.
And I love that, because you're 100% right with that statement, that it requires extreme discipline. Because even if you're sitting and you're a used car manager, a used car director, and you're sitting in front of that computer, I was talking to Jason Rice about this, or I'm sorry, Chris Keene, at Lot Walk about this. And he said, I'm talking to dealers and they keep telling me that the cars are too expensive. They're way over the mark. And he asked me, like, Frank, you have a team that goes out there still and buys cars at auction. How are they buying cars and still able to find deals? And I said, well, it really requires extreme discipline, right? I don't have the time to do it, but my buyers, they sit there for 10 to 12 hours just looking at cars. So the dealers that say, hey, the cars are too expensive, they probably are too expensive in the window of time that those dealers have to watch. And that's not a knock on anybody, but it's just reality that most used car managers, used car directors don't have the bandwidth to sit there for as long as it takes to find the deals. So they end up getting the best deal that they can in the moment, right? It's kind of like if you go out and you appraise only a handful of cars, you may get the best deal on the cars that you appraised, but how much better would your results be if you appraised everything, or if you touched every service drive car that came through your building? Like, how much better would your results be? So, Todd, I want to shift a little bit, and I just want to, when you walk in and you've talked to some dealers, you said you talked to a number of dealers this last week. I know your
Yeah.
head was probably spinning. How quickly can you tell if a store is serious about acquisitions or if they're just dabbling around?
That's a tough question to answer. I can tell you right now, first thing I do is go to their website.
Mm.
Does their website tell me that they want to buy cars, right? Does their web and do they have an actual good piece of software on there that actually gives the customer an instant cash offer, allows them to upload pictures, upload videos? Is it
Mm.
on their search return page on new cars and used cars? Is it on their VDP? Is it in their when you're looking at their photos, right? Is it in the overlays? Is there a special tile telling the consumer that they want to buy their car? That's number one, right? Their website tells you whether or not they're for real right off the bat.
So, dealer,
Secondly,
check
if
your
I actually,
website,
yeah,
right?
the website, right? Then if I go visit, when I drive down the street and I pull into the store, is there anything on this in signage, right? Do they have a "we want to buy your car" picture, right? Like, do they have anything there um, that tells me that they want to buy my car from me as a consumer? I go into the service waiting area and I look to see if there's anything in the service waiting area that tells me that they want to buy my car. I go to the service drive to the desk where the service writer sits and I look there. Is there something telling me I can scan a QR code or that we want to make an offer on your car? Um, I do a Google search for the name of the dealer or the town that they're in that I'm looking to sell my car. Do they show up on Google? I ask AI, right? I live in Mooresville, North Carolina. That's where I am right now. That's where I live.
Okay.
I'm in Mooresville, North Carolina. I want to sell my car to a dealer. Who do you recommend that I sell it to that's going to give me a really strong offer on my 2024 Chevy Silverado High Country? And I see what AI gives me. That's
So,
how I find out who's for real,
yeah.
right? Or I pick up the phone and I mystery shop, right? or I fill out a form on a website, I want to sell my car, or I do a chat on the website that I want to sell my car. What kind of follow up do I get? Do I get any follow up at all? I'll take some VIN numbers, right? Go to a website, get some instant cash offers. What kind of follow up do I get? Are they following up at all? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and is the follow up more than a day? Right? Um,
Ooh.
because
Yeah. Because,
you see that a lot, right? Hey, we
yeah.
want, when can you bring it in? It's always, when can you bring it in? When can you bring it in? No, I don't want to bring it in. I want you to give me a number of my car because I'm going to sell it to somebody and I'm shotgunning my VIN around town to 10 dealers, which every customer's doing if they want to sell their car, right? Everybody
Yeah.
does that. Copy
Yeah.
and paste your VIN on every website, including Carvana, including CarMax if there's one in your market. That's how I find out if anybody's for real.
Yeah, man, and I love that because if you're a dealer principal, if you're a used car manager, used car director, GSM, some of this is very easy, right? If you
It's all
sit,
easy.
if you sit at your, you could be at home in your, in your pajamas, and you can go to your website right now and check and see. All right, you know what? I'm watching this. It's late night. Let me go to my website and just see. Do I scream that I want to buy cars? And if I don't, what changes do I need to make? One of the things we recognize, Todd, that you touched on was with, and this is how Auto Acquire is trying to help dealers, right? We recognize that there's dealers out there. I was talking to a dealer out in California, and I go to his website, and there's nothing on the website that says, we want to buy your car. There's not even a widget on their website to get an instant offer. It's a page that says, call this one person if you'd like an offer on your car. No one's doing that. So I called that dealer up and I said, hey, look, right now, Auto Acquire is running a promotion. You can have a free widget on your website. It's free. It's a free instant cash offer widget on your website so that you take the friction out for your customers, because that's what it's really about, is taking the friction away from the customers, right? But you can do that if you're sitting at home and you just go to the website and you look at your website. Well, what does my widget look like? Do I scream, I want to buy your car? And then I think the other thing you said, when you're walking into a dealership, do you have signage around your dealership saying, hey, I want to buy your car? Here's a simple way, here's a banner in my service drive with a QR code that says, I want to buy your car, scan here. Do you have anything like that in your dealership? Some of these things are so simple that we could do it. We just have to be committed to doing it, right?
It's totally commitment. Yeah, it's totally commitment. Frank, I want to, if you don't mind, like, I'd like to shift this conversation a little bit towards the biggest event in the car business coming up in early February, if that's okay with you, because
That,
we're getting
that's
short on time. But I
Yeah, that's
love,
absolutely fine with me, Todd. I was
yeah, I
I was
love
thinking the
NAD.
same
We
thing.
because
Like,
we you and I could talk about this all day.
yep,
We could. So NADA, right? You're going, I'm going. This is going to be like my 27th NADA, I think. I've been going forever. I love it. I
yeah,
absolutely love NADA.
Todd. This is going to be my second NADA, and
That's
the
right.
first was last year. The
That's
first was
right.
last year. That was a little bit of a bust, right? So
Yeah.
I don't even know what the true NADA should look like. So I'm glad you brought the topic up, because I think not just me, but anyone who's kind of new to this space, and even if you've been going for years, like, there's some things that are pretty excited. I know last week we talked about you speaking. You have a speaking engagement. Glenn Lundy
Yeah.
has a speaking engagement. There's so much going on, but you're a seasoned pro. So, man, what are you looking forward to the most? What are the can't miss opportunities that are there? And how do you manage your time while you're there? I mean, so many questions I have for you that we
Yeah.
probably could have taken a whole show to just talk about.
So
But man, great, great,
I'll
great, great topic that you shifted us to, for sure.
I'll go quick, right? So let me start with some wisdom for people that are vendors, okay? Because as a dealer, it's really frustrating when you go to NADA and you've only got basically 2.5 days, and you walk the floor and you want to go see a vendor, or you have an appointment with a vendor. An unprepared vendor is probably the worst thing for a car dealer to experience when they're there. And
Mm,
you see it all the time, right? People that are not good pitching their product, right? They don't know their product. the internet doesn't work in their booth, right? Like it drives you nuts. Every time you go to NADA, it doesn't matter where it is, the internet's always slow. Figure it out, right? I don't care what you got to do to figure it out, but figure it out because it happens all the time. As a dealer, you only got so much time there, right? And you can get literally lost walking down through those through those big giant halls, down those aisles, and you only got a certain amount of time. And as a vendor, you got X amount of time to engage with a car dealer. Make sure you're ready. A lot of times what happens is these they go to Vegas and they go wild, right? And they're out and they're drunk, and the next day they're hungover, and you go to their booth and they smell like booze, okay? They're not prepared. They haven't shaved. They're not cleaned up, and they're just not ready. Like, you know what? Party after Vegas is over with, right? I think NADA ends on a Friday this year. Take Friday night to party after all the dealers are gone, but be on your game because the booths are not cheap. Sending a team to NADA, no matter what size your business is very, very expensive. So be on your game, know your product, make sure your internet works, right? Like make sure and be prepared as a vendor. Like that's the advice I would give you because it's extreme. And any dealer that's out there that's watching this is probably nodding their head because I'll guarantee you they've experienced that at NADA. Um, as a dealer, I would say all you're going to see is these two letters in your head the whole time you're there. AI, AI, AI. Everybody's calling themselves an AI company now. A lot of the legacy vendors have got AI built into their products right now. Um, and I would caution anybody that's going to be buying or signing up for any AI products to really make sure that the data that the AI is getting is accurate, because if it doesn't get accurate data, it isn't going to work properly, number one. And number two, we live in this business of all these different bolt-on pieces of software, right? A bolt-on for this, a bolt-on for that, a bolt-on for this. What I'm scared of when I look at this industry, what I fear really is a bunch of bolt-ons with AI products, because it's really going to confuse employees and it's going to confuse customers,
Yeah.
and it could potentially could be a real mess, right? Um, I would want to do business with someone who has a suite of AI products that really, for fixed ops, for variable ops, for accounting, that all talk to each other, that's all using the same data. Because if you don't, I think you're going to have a real mess on your hands. I really, really do. And I wouldn't go signing up for an AI products at NADA unless I was sure of those things. Does that make sense?
Makes complete sense. Makes
I
complete
mean,
sense.
there's certain things like, you know, there's certain software that's going to use AI to do simple tasks, and I think for a simple task that's okay, right? But most things that happen in a dealership, they're not simple processes at all. Every dealership, they may look like a silo on a financial statement, but everything has to work together and be cohesive. And that's the biggest problem in our industry is we have so much of this fragmented and bolt-on software. I don't want to see that happen with AI. So I caution people with that. And the last thing I'll say about NADA as we close up here, Frank, is NADA is a great place to establish relationships. I have made so many really good close friends in this industry by going to NADA every year. Like I've made some great connections by going, and there's some dealers that say, I just don't go, I don't want to go, or vendors that say, it's just too expensive, and I can understand that because it is expensive as a vendor to go, but you still got to be there, right? You got to know what's going on.
Yeah.
So try to make the time, make a list. These are the vendors that I want to see for sure. Try to schedule an appointment ahead of time so you can use your time wisely, and then try to schedule time with the people that you actually want to see when you're there that you don't normally see, because it goes by, as you went last year, right? Really, really, really fast. Like it's a blur. From the moment you get off that plane in Vegas, you just get into this, boom, you're gone, right? There's a time change for most people. You're up late, and all of a sudden you start bumping into people, a 10-minute conversation here, a 15-minute conversation there. All of a sudden you look at your watch or your phone, and you were supposed to be somewhere else a half hour ago, and you're way delayed. Like you got to be really, we talk about the word discipline. I think discipline is really important at NADA for sure, and be
Yeah.
scheduled.
Yeah, no, man. Last year was a lot of fun. I went and again, you're right. It flew by. By the time I landed, and then as I started, really working, I had a couple speaking engagements last year, so I was prepping for those. And by the time all of it was said and done, I didn't get to see really a 25% of what was available at NADA. I didn't really get to see because I just ran out of time. And so I think you're right. It taught me, one word that you talked about was discipline, right? It taught me that this time I need to be very disciplined in having a schedule of people I want to see, booths I want to see, and speaking engagements that I want to hear, or topics that I want to hear about. And you're right. I think AI is going to be a big push. I am weary of that. I I hope that everyone does their research when diving into some of the organizations or companies out there that are saying, "Hey, this is AI," when really it's just a Chat GPT wrapper around their product that they already had for years.
Which a
Um,
lot of it is too, and I think that's what you got to be cautious of. That's a good way to put it. A lot of it
yeah,
is.
yeah. But man, so Todd, what as we close out here, man, I love working with you on this project, the buy side. The last couple of episodes have been fantastic. Next week we'll have David Long on. Interviewing you has been insightful for me.
Well, I'm going to do the
Um,
same thing with you. I'm going to interrogate you. I think pretty soon, right? When we don't, if we don't have a guest, uh, we're gonna do the Frank Knox interview too. And another thing,
that
Frank, I'll say this first. Thank you, number one. The other thing I'll say too is this, right? Like we're getting some people that are starting to tune into this, which is great. We want to talk to people. We want to hear their story, right? I'll speak for the both of us, and I don't care. You don't need to be someone quote unquote famous in this business. I'll talk to anybody, right? You're a used car manager, you're a sales manager, you run a BDC, you sell cars, like whoever. Like I just like talking to people in this industry because to get different perspectives and hear their story helps really educate our audience. And that's at the end of the day what it's all about. I mean, we're not. I don't think you and I intended just on doing this with having the headliners in the industry talk. Like I want to talk to anybody. Like
yeah,
guys that buy
no,
cars at the auction. Like I want to talk to them.
yeah, no, I'm with you. And if you're listening in, one, two things really. Please share. Please share with everyone. The buy side. We have a LinkedIn page. Please share that. Please share this on YouTube as it is dropped on Monday. But the other thing that I would say is, Todd, you're 100% right. I want to talk to everyone. And I think, at some point we're going to have some roundtables where, we hope to have 4 or 5 dealers on at the same time that we can interview and just round robin it and find out what's going on in the space. Because, yes, it's one thing to hear from vendors and hear about what they're seeing. It's something completely different when we talk to dealers and talk about their concerns and frustrations that they're seeing in the store. So, I think that's a great call out. As we end episode 3, I would say that again, when you're talking about acquisitions, I think Todd touched on a few things. One, it requires extreme discipline. Two, if you're playing in the buy side world, lean on people who can help you, whether it's a friend, whether it's a consultant, whether it's another dealer who's having success, right? We rattled off a few names of people who have, large scale operations for buying. Those folks will take a message from you or an email from you just to help, because we're all trying to help in this industry. And that's why Todd and I put this together. So as we close out here, Todd, love you, man. I'm super appreciative of you. And we will catch you guys next week on the next episode of The Buy Side. Thank you.
Awesome.